We like
comics.
because they have no home.
It's Halloween in August, and I'm Joe Getcho.
And I'm Mike White, and I don't want you to forget, come to Quarks. Quarks is fun. Come right
Quarks
now.
is fun.
Don't walk.
Quarks is fun.
Run.
Fun.
What have you done to the replicator? This is also the
Brian.
Clean Comic Book Podcast. This is also the Clean Comic Book Podcast. We like comics because they have no bones. So find us on social media at Boneless Comics Podcast or on Blue Sky Social or X at Boneless Comics 1 and use the hashtag Boneless Comics Podcast to join the conversation and share your thoughts.
That's right. And today's boneless review is going to be about Star Trek Holo-Ween, written by Christopher Sequeira with art by Joe Eisma and Charlie Kirchhoff and published in 2023 by IDW.
And after listening to today's review, check out our after shows on YouTube. We will not be doing one specifically for this episode, but if you want to see our thoughts on really the whole Star Trek franchise, that's definitely out there. Mm-hmm. And I think we've done some other discussion in previous Trek episodes. So check that out. We also talk about comic book creatives there, and we take you into a deeper dive of comic book history. So if that sounds interesting, check it out. We also will be giving a shout out to listener comments on social media.
Yeah.
So today's story, it should be noted, first of all, that it is Star Trek Holo-Ween, not Halloween. So like hologram. And if you look behind Joe there, you can see it spelled correctly. So
holographic Halloween.
Yes, the holodeck is a very big part of this. So I think what we're going to do for our synopsis is we're going to leave it to Lieutenant Commander Data to tell us what happens.
Second Officer's Log, Stardate 47614.5. During a routine journey following a trip through some solar storms, the Enterprise D was invaded by the entity known as Redjac, a non-corporeal being that feeds on the fear and terror of sentient beings. Ironically, this incursion coincided with Counselor Deanna Troy's decision to celebrate the archaic Earth custom of Halloween. As officers began to disappear, Captain Picard gave the order to lock down the ship. With a strong knowledge of Starfleet history, he informed the crew that Redjac is capable of possessing both humanoid lifeforms and electrical systems, and Dr. Crusher began work with Counselor Troy to combat its effects on the crew. It was at that time that I observed an irregularity in the holodeck power systems. There I discovered Redjac in the guise of Lieutenant Albert Block, revealing that he had found Borg nanoprobes and information about the crew's apprehension towards them in our database. I engaged the Redjac entity in combat. Regrettably, Redjac injected Block's body with nanoprobes, allowing him to become impervious to phaser fire. Separating my positronic head from my body, Redjac was able to exert control over my systems as well, and alter my physical appearance to inspire an emotion: fear in the crew. Extending his reach beyond the holodeck, Redjac then used myself and others as his agents on board the Enterprise. At this time, Dr. Crusher and Counselor Troy proposed an experimental procedure that would temporarily hypnotize key crew members into believing they were monsters in Redjac's simulation, allowing them to infiltrate his inner circle. Captain Picard, Commander Riker, Lieutenant Worf, and Counselor Troy were chosen for this mission. While Captain Picard, Commander Riker, and Lieutenant Worf engaged Redjac, I encountered Counselor Troy in the guise of the mummy, Terrap suit. Temporarily breaking from Redjac's control, Deanna assisted me in removing Redjac's control chip. Following this, myself and the away team were able to extract many hostages from the holodeck. It was also at this time that an unauthorized transport produced one Captain Montgomery Scott, a new ally against the Redjac entity. Counselor Troy also revealed that due to her unique empathic abilities, similar to those of Redjac, she could re-enter Dr. Crusher's hypnosis, blocking her fear, but also retaining more autonomy than the other crew members. The away team re-entered the holodeck, where I discovered a hidden chamber housing Redjac's remaining 7 hostages. Unfortunately, Captain Scott discovered a subspace tunnel, covertly by Redjac, to bring an ally from Vagra 2, the being known as Armus. Counselor Troy quickly realized this was a deception, however. Despite it being an artificial creation, Sim Armus was capable of leaving the holodeck, and began an extended period of attempting to gain new hostages to feed Redjac's hunger for fear. While Commander Riker and Counselor Troy enacted a plan to bring Redjac to the bridge, I remained on the holodeck to search for the missing crew. After freeing them and severing Redjac's source of sustenance, Counselor Troy approached Redjac with a subspace conduit projector. Using detailed maps of Redjac's mind, based on Captain Scott's experience, Troy was able to remove the entity from Lieutenant Block's body and dissipate the consciousness of Redjac. I theorized that it could take centuries for it to reconstitute. Having restored a peaceful state to the Enterprise, Captain Picard displayed his curious proclivity for quoting Shakespeare, and the Halloween festivities continued unimpeded.
All right, well, to start off with, what is your favorite scary Star Trek episode? And are there any fears of the crew that you wish were included in this story?
So that's your first question. What's your favorite scary movie?
What's
7
your favorite
days.
scary movie? Well, so Star Trek is one of those things that I view like there are certain other properties that can do this too, but while it's a science fiction show, they're able to genre bend a little bit and kind of hit a horror story or a crime drama mystery kind of thing. And it always kind of has that sci-fi element, but they're able to do different genres, and they have tried to do scary or like horror-ish things before. So.
Well, and it's a storytelling thing too, because you have this, future advanced society that's a utopia. And so in order to make it exciting, you make it into a dystopia. So the ship that used to be safe is now a scary place because we've got Halloween monsters running around and, things like that. Or like in the episode Night Terrors, we have Troy who's like floating up to this giant space something or other with lights everywhere. And it's just like eyes in the dark. And she's like, where are you? What's going on?
Where are you?
And there's that like sleep deprivation that's making everybody crazy. And there's a lot of episodes like that.
Oh,
or like
yeah.
Barclay's protomorphosis syndrome, where he like turns into that like spider thing, like that was pretty weird too. But a lot of times like it's so weird that I don't really think of it as scary. It's just like really like interesting sci-fi that goes in a different direction, not like, oh, they're actually scaring me, because this wasn't scary either.
I would agree that generally speaking they don't cross over into what would really be like Aliens, for instance, is a horror action or a horror sci-fi hybrid. And it's clearly they're like pulling elements from both and making something out of that. But Star Trek is very much always on the sci-fi side of things. And you're always going to get like a science explanation at the end for here's why what was happening makes sense. Well, the eyes in the dark were actually like a hydrogen molecule or something that they needed to complete this message. That one actually, I think, is Night Terrors is probably one of the scarier episodes of Star Trek in general, just because people not getting REM sleep manifests in them having these like waking hallucinations. They're like Riker lays down on his bed, and then all of a sudden he like pulls back the covers and there's like snakes all over him and stuff like that. And it's just because his imagination he's not reaching REM sleep, so he's not dreaming. So they start like dreaming in the waking world, and that idea is kind of scary, I think.
Ooh,
so
you know what was really creepy though? It just made me think of it. Like maybe scary, but like creepy was the episode where they're all being like abducted in the middle of the night.
Yes.
And so they're doing the play, and then it's like kind of weird and it's like psychological. And then there's at one point where they're like trying to recreate it in the holodeck, and they all look at each other, and Riker's like, has anyone else been in this room before? Because they did such a good job making it real that it actually felt like they were in that place that they were barely remembering in their subconscious. That was a creepy episode. Yeah.
I think that's Schisms. I think that's the name of that.
That's what it sounds.
The Solanae, or the race. I mean, we don't get a name in that episode, but Star Trek Online names them the Solanae. But that was probably the first one that came to mind for me, because it's so eerie. For some reason, whenever they're doing a holodeck recreation of something creepy, there's that one, and there's also the episode where where Geordi is changing into that like veiny neon glowy alien, and the Tarchanin 4. Yeah, there you go. That's Geordi. Good old Geordi. He was having a rough day.
Really? He was looking blue.
Yeah, that one they're trying to like recreate something, and they're like, well, there was nobody else here on the planet, but they find that like one of the shadows doesn't match in the holographic recording, and so they're having the computer like recreate the shape of what created that shadow. And that was really creepy, where they're like, there was someone else there with us, but we couldn't see them. And I think that they do stuff like that pretty well on TNG, where it may not be like terrifying, but it's actually, they're able to do creepy stuff. The one that comes to mind to me that actually I remember seeing it on TV when it first aired as a kid is, and I believe the name of the episode is The Thaw on Voyager. There is a fear clown basically in this induced hallucination, that the idea is that all of the crew or all the people on this planet were sent into this environment that was supposed to be a utopia, but I guess it was some kind of like an AI. And so it was like learning from the people's minds. And it was like, well, they won't accept, kind of like the Matrix, like they won't accept the simulation when there's no suffering. But we've realized that we can keep their minds engaged if we're constantly scaring them. So there's like this fear clown that's sort of like the embodiment of that. And they are actually, like, people are dying going into this simulation because they're being scared so intensely that their hearts are stopping. They're literally being scared to death. And I don't know why this just like shook me as a kid, but they're like putting Harry Kim into like a guillotine, and he looks up and he's screaming, and you see the blade like drop, and then they like go to commercial. And that just like, my heart was like racing after the first time I saw that as a kid. I was like, oh my gosh. So that's the Fear Clown episode is probably the one that I would think of the most, is that Voyager episode, as being like, wow, this is like genuinely, like, Star Trek doesn't usually push it quite this far. So
I'm scared now just listening to it.
Yeah. And it was Michael McKean playing that character too. So he's kind of like a comedic actor, but I think that allowed him to bring kind of like an eeriness to the role. So yeah. So have you, I think I know the answer to this, but have you seen Wolf in the Fold, the TOS episode that this is based on? Because Redjac is actually from an original series episode where he interacts directly with Scotty.
Yeah, if I've seen it, it's been a while. I don't really remember it that well.
So this is going to be, again, one of those, like, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself too much towards the end, but I recently rewatched it with my fiance. And yeah, like, that episode actually has quite a bit of eeriness to it. And the Redjac entity is killing a lot of people, actually. Like, there's a pretty decent body count, and they keep finding Scotty holding this bloody knife over like dead like female ensigns, and like a dancer on this planet, Argelis 2, that they visit, which actually, if you read the comic, the Enterprise passes by that planet at the beginning of the story. So that's sort of the link to, like, they went through this solar storm, and at the end of the TOS episode, the Redjac entity, which again, it's non-corporeal, so it has no physical form, but it's basically something that feeds on fear. And Spock theorizes that, he's like, well, there are creatures all over the universe that feed on various emotions. And it made me think of like the Green Lantern Corps, because he's like, well, this one, like, fear is a very primal and powerful emotion, so maybe he can harness like a lot of sustenance from that. The cloud minders of whatever this planet feed off of love. And, and I was like, oh, so the Star Sapphires, is that what they are?
And the Sinestro Corps, and
So it was funny, but they, one thing that I don't know if they made clear in this story that was very clear and like added another layer to it from the show, was that Redjac is actually Jack the Ripper. Like, there were murders before Jack the Ripper that the entity caused, and there were murders after that on Earth. And basically, this entity was based somewhere around Earth. And so there are different like countries throughout history, and they actually go up to like the 2100s in Starfleet history, when like Spock is reciting off like these incidents, because of course they check the computer and it's like, many incidents matched what happened on this planet. And it was not Majel Barrett. It was like terrible. Yeah. But the idea is that the entity was sort of Earth-based, but then when they left, it left on a starship or it left in some kind of a host body and traveled to different planets. So now it's out here on this planet. And the way that they track it down actually is because there's an investigator on the planet in the TOS episode that's from Rigel 4. And they find in the computer that, there was a recent string of murders on Rigel 4. So he must be host to the entity, or like he brought it here, basically. So that's kind of the thing. But
that
yeah, it was pretty interesting. It was actually creepy. I mean, it was mostly sold by the actors, right? Because TOS doesn't have the budget to show us as much spectacle as this comic book. Like, so it was mostly sold by them kind of like doing investigation in the computer and going, oh, so this is what it did. And like, they're all looking around the room, like which of us has been host to this entity? Did it actually take over Scotty? Did he actually murder these people like with it in control? And, so that was the mystery, but it was definitely like interesting. And of course, because they've done an HD remaster of TOS, it didn't look like as dated as sometimes like Deep Space Nine and some of the other shows do. So
yeah, so they do in the comic call out that he was Jack the Ripper. They do mention that the original series dealt with this. So there's definitely that kind of like TNG continuity thing where they would do that, where they're like, well, the original Enterprise crew encountered this. And so we would have a scene where we explore the history to give you a recap if you missed the original series episode, to kind of bring you up to speed and bring the TNG characters up to speed. So then we could proceed to deal with whatever it is. But there's always some nuance of either, they had some special tool or they had a special instrument that just happened to fit the conditions. So the TNG crew has to kind of figure out a new way to overcome the obstacle that the TOS crew did. So this kind of fit that, I thought, in the comic itself, kind of giving you that enough of a background to go, hey, there's a TOS episode about an entity that is somehow Jack the Ripper that kills people. Okay, great. We know they dealt with it. They got rid of it, and somehow it found its way on the Enterprise D and TNG. Okay, that's like the plot of, several episodes of the actual show. So it tracks in a comic book.
Well, I do feel like what's weird about it, though, is that where they have set this comic book is specifically, it's got to be at least post season 6, because that's when Jellicoe was on board and he was like, no, you're going to wear a uniform, counselor. You're not just going to come on the bridge in your low cut thing, because that's not appropriate for on duty. Everybody else has to wear a uniform, which actually Marina Sirtis had been pushing for a long time. She's like, why don't I wear a uniform? Like, I should be in a uniform. So I noticed that by season
she's also
6,
a commander, though.
Oh, okay. Well, then
because they show her pips and they show that she's got 3 solid ones. So I was like, oh, this is like, towards the end of the show, right? Because wasn't it like mid season 7 when she did the bridge exam thing and got her commander's rank?
Yeah, something. I mean, I wouldn't have known that, but you put it in your notes, so I was like, oh, that's where that happened. But that sets it in a very specific part of TNG, and by that point, the writers had really moved on from doing this let's riff on something from TOS thing, and I feel like that was really an early TNG trope where they're like, would they, they had the Naked Time on TOS. We're gonna do Get Naked Now. I mean, the Naked Now, and they did a lot of that early on in the show where they're like, this is a TNG take on a very TOS idea. Right. And by the time they were at season 7, they were really kind of had let that go, I feel like, and established their own identity for the show. So it's almost like a weird tone for them to go back to that with the characters in the season 7 state.
At the same time, though, this is 2023 when this was written. So it's kind of like when you're writing this now, you're looking back at TNG as a whole because you have the benefit of seeing all of it and what came after and all the movies and everything else. So you almost have more of an opportunity to tell a story because you can kind of hint to future events somehow because we all know what's going to happen. But to your point, it's like they made a conscious decision to base this in post season 7, where Commander Troy is now a commander, not a lieutenant commander, and also use that earlier trope. So it's like, why did they make those decisions? If they were going to make a decision that was, because I felt that I was like, this to me feels like a season 2 episode. That's like, I see your idea. You've got a couple good things in here, but it's kind of a, you know, filler episode. But then I saw the Commander Troy thing and I thought, well, why is this so far along in their story if it feels like something early? So it was kind of weird.
Well, and you know, like you said, we have the benefit of having seen the whole show, all the movies. We know all the context for all of TNG, but it does feel like just the general tone of this, especially because it gets pretty wacky with them actually physically transforming members of the crew into like classic Universal monsters
voluntarily.
Like that almost feels like a TOS thing. Not even TNG, but it does.
Feels like a Scooby-Doo thing.
Yeah, they feel like story decisions that would have been made early in the show where they're like, we don't know what the tone of the show is yet. We're kind of just like throw everything at the board and see what fits because we don't really know our characters yet. And I feel like if they had the stripe on their uniform and it was set in that time period, I might have been less critical of some of the story elements because I would have gone, oh, they're going for kind of the hokier earlier part of the show. So
I think that would have fit a lot better because I'm looking at this too of, again, this was written in 2023. So I'm expecting like when we read Star Trek Year 5, it's like this is a modern take on an older Star Trek where they have elevated it, but they've still kept it in continuity. Like Star Trek Year 5 did a really great job of making it feel like TOS, but not making it feel like the production value of the 60s. Whereas this to me really felt like it captured the show, although it was kind of like some oddities of how they, you know, like we said, season 7 or season 2, but also it was kind of like, well, why would you do that? I guess, why would you add another episode within the same tone in the same time period as when it originally aired? You know, this is 2023. This is significantly far along, you know, since we've had TNG. Why not take it to the next level? Why not make it a little bit more sciencey, a little bit more grounded? You know, they try to give us something new that we didn't have before, where they call out security medical specialist. And it's like, that's your contribution after this whole time to TNG. Like, I'm not trying to, you know, Jack the Ripper this apart, but at the same time, it sounds like you were looking at the same lens that I was, where some things just like kind of bothered me more so in this than if I was actually watching TNG. Because TNG came out when it did, and it is what it is. But you're telling a TNG story in 2023. Why are you not taking us, you know, to the future, you know, essentially with the story and the characters?
I felt like some of the characterization was a little bit weird. Honestly, I feel like the setup of this is an entity. It's not corporeal, but it reads people's emotional state and it gains nutrients off of their fear. They, for one, they had Troy narrating a lot of the story, which I thought that's a good choice. She's a good point of view character for a story that's about emotions, right? Because she can read everybody else's emotions. But a lot of her internal dialogue was things like, you know, I really feel it intensely when the whole crew is afraid and it threatens to overwhelm me and all this stuff. And I was thinking, she's stronger than that. Like, we've never seen her break down in an episode, because like, even when the whole ship, like they were worried that like Picard had been assimilated and they'd wiped out a fleet and everything, she wasn't so overwhelmed by the emotions of the crew around her that she wasn't able to function as an officer. She was still like helpful on board the ship. And it seemed like the authors of this were implying that she couldn't handle it when everybody was just in this panic state, where I'm like, I feel like, especially by this point in the show, she has developed the mental discipline to have blocks to, yes, I can feel that. Yes, it's there, but I'm going to put it aside and do my job, kind of thing. The other side of that coin is, what I thought was cool was that when they went under the hypnosis, they showed that Troy, because of her mental abilities, was strong enough to actually pull herself out of it and be sort of in the monster state that they induced, but still aware of her mission and able to understand Dr. Crusher and things like that. So I thought that was cool, but I also thought, I don't know, just a lot of her internal dialogue. I was like, she's not like this weak pansy that like can't handle it when everybody's afraid. Like, that's not who she is.
Well, and it kind of made me wonder, does she have her position because of her abilities, and she has an honorary counselor, title or degree, or is she actually a licensed and trained, psychologist, therapist, counselor, HR department for this entire ship? Because it made me start to wonder too. I was like, okay, so Worf has a security team, Geordi has an engineering team. Does Deanna get a counseling team?
Really, for a ship of over 1,000 people, it shouldn't be just her.
Yeah. And she wouldn't spend her time on the bridge. She would spend her time in her office talking to people because they'd be coming out, to her office all the time. But the thing is, like, so right at the beginning,
that's a problem with the show in general, though. Yeah. That's not really this comic.
But see,
they show her maybe 6 times counseling somebody.
But when you write a comic today about something that's 40, 50 years old, why not?
Right.
Why not make it because they actually do that a little bit. They say that Barclay's like, oh, she used to run these like hostage takeover situational drills or something. And my ears kind of perked up like, oh, she actually does something other than I feel great joy and satisfaction, like she actually has something that she can actually contribute with the skills that she gained becoming a counselor. But then she goes to Picard and says, hey, Worf is really more concerned than he's letting on. And Picard's like, to our chief of security, he's more concerned about everything. The unknown is always a serious enemy. Our systems took a mild shaking, so it's no big deal. Let's just move on. And it's like, okay, so first of all, Picard obviously doesn't care what Troy has to think. He's like, it's no big deal. And that's kind of like a poor leadership quality for him. And then, like our systems took a mild beating. I'm sure everything's fine. Like these are people's lives hanging in the balance. And your counselor who you put on the bridge, who you trust, who is now a commander on your bridge says, hey, this Klingon warrior who is very proud that we've seen for 7 seasons of combat and trial and stuff with his brother and with his homeland and all this stuff is saying, hey, something is off. Something doesn't feel right. It's fine. No big deal. Like
you should probably take that seriously, especially because the precedent for a lot of the show is that he does kind of use her as a lie detector a lot. Like there'll very often be, and I guess she can project her empathy, for lack of a better word, her empathic
receptors.
Her empathic field, whatever it is, she can project that across space because they'll be talking on a view screen to like a Romulan commander. And, Troy will be like, yeah, he's lying. None of what he said is true. And Picard can kind of use that to inform his decision. What you just said made me think about Picard versus Sisko as far as leadership styles. I feel like Sisko is a much more collaborative leader than Captain Picard, where he's a lot more willing to take other people's ideas, and if it's better than his, go, yeah, we're going to do that. Whereas I do feel like Picard, he'll listen to everybody in the conference room, but he's going to make a decision and that's it. And you kind of got to abide by it. So that may just be, I'm trying to decide if he's poorly written in this story or if that's actually a character trait that's supported by the show. I think there are instances where it's supported by the show.
Yeah. That's kind of how they write him in general. And that's, I'm sure if you look at the consistency of the characters over the show and did a study, you'd probably find all kinds of inconsistencies. And we don't want to go there because we're not trying to get that analytical.
Right.
But it's like when you're reading this comic on the page, it's like, do you want to feel like you're watching an episode for, through your TV through time, or do you want to feel like you're watching something that's sort of a newer take on something older? And if they do that, do they take it in a direction that you don't like? So I think it's really hard to do stuff like this and find a good balance between we want to add to the mythos, but we don't want to change it. we don't want to explain, if Troy has a degree or not, because the show never did. And so we don't want to tread in that territory. But what ends up happening is, because they're looking at, again, we're looking at holistically at all of TNG, they're kind of writing this comic with all of that in mind. So now we have a combination of things. We have the feel of season 2 with Troy, Commander from season 7, with Picard with a, stick up his butt from maybe Generations, where he is just like, I don't want to tell anybody what's going on, and, that kind of thing. And so maybe it could be like it's an amalgamation of so many different points that when you put them all together, it's kind of like, where exactly does this take place?
Do you think it's possible that Picard was also feeling some trepidation and feeling unsettled as the entity sort of descended upon the ship, but because he's so emotionally closed off to the crew and everybody else that he was like, no, I'm going to dismiss this thing about Worf too. Of course, there's nothing in the story to support that, but I'm just asking, would that be possible for his character? Because that feels more like, maybe.
So there's one scene, and this is kind of like later, but I want to bring it up now because it really speaks to Picard's character. Because so we have Armis, and we'll talk about how he gets there later. But basically, Armis shows up at one point. So Armis killed Tasha Yar in cold blood in front of everybody. Okay, so Picard is like, hey, Armis is here. Oh my goodness, this is too much. All right, we need to initiate the self-destruct sequence. And that's okay in this story. But when the Borg invade in First Contact, which takes place after this, suddenly Picard is like, wait a minute. So everything that just happened to me in Generations has taken a toll. And now suddenly I have this like crazy Borg fear. And if the Borg are on board, I'm not destroying the ship and walking away. I'm going to seek revenge for that. But he doesn't want revenge for Tasha Yar. He's okay with destroying the Enterprise then. It felt to me like it was a little weird. Like, are we okay with blowing the ship up, or are we not okay with blowing the ship up? I guess the Borg was more personal, but again, Tasha was a little personal too.
That was pretty personal. I did not rewatch Skin of Evil. Mainly because Armis's involvement in this story is pretty minor, all things told. And so I was like, I don't know that I need to revisit like every major story point of that. Mainly what I remember about that episode is Frakes talking about it on stage at Comic-Con a few years ago, where he's like, after they had me jump and all that like black crap, and it was like in my throat and it was everywhere. Like all the other actors were like, well, I'm not doing that. And he was like, you can refuse? Like, I didn't know that I could say no. And they're just like, LeVar Burton's like, yeah, I'm not doing that. And same with Gates McFadden and all that. So that always stands out to me. It's a funny moment. It's just like a new actor where he's like, well, I thought I had to do whatever they told me. And they're just like, no, that's not in my contract. Armis has a personal connection to this crew, right? Yeah. Especially to Data, because Data was, it's through a weird series of circumstances, but he was very briefly romantically involved with Tasha. What's weird is that then the writers for the rest of the show kind of play that up like they were deeply in love or something, which I don't think was exactly portrayed on screen, but First Contact even references it in that kind of like reverent manner, and so does The Measure of a Man and all of that. So I think with Armis, or Sim Armis as he was not actually Armis, being there, it was a missed opportunity to have like Data have some kind of reaction to it. Yeah, because by that point they had freed him and he was off by himself again for some reason, looking for the hostages on the holodeck. And I feel like they could have done something with his character to have him be affected in some way. I know this is pre-emotion shit, but they still could have come up with some kind of writerly thing where he's like unsettled or something like that. Yeah,
it's not that he's having an emotional reaction, but he at least acknowledges that, this sequence of events took place, and based on what he knows about human history, there would be some kind of, revenge or vengeance thing. And while he can't feel those emotions, he can understand maybe the nuance or the irony of a situation in which you're confronted with someone who caused you,
Sure.
Took something from you. They could have found a way, to your point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know. I felt like that was something that they could have done. I was also just disappointed that it wasn't actually Armis. That they, like, on one page they're like, he's sending a subspace signal to Vegra 2. And so I know from watching Wolf in the Fold, Redjac exists in subspace. Basically, that's where he can travel through subspace. That's how he's going from planet to planet. I would assume that whenever a ship opens up the bubble to subspace with their warp drive, that he can just hitch a ride and go along if he's not in like a human host body or something. So that kind of explains how he gets from A to Z. But when he did that, I was like, cool, that seems like it's within his abilities based on what I know. And he's sending it to Vegra 2. Okay, well, I know that's the planet that Armis is from. So I felt like it would have been really easy to just go, yeah, he's actually here. And that would have been a lot scarier than this is some like simulated version of him. And I was trying to scare you by making you think I did that.
Redjac takes his, so like when he first appears, he's taken over that block guy, and he creates these like Borg implants on half of his body, and he runs around like that for a while, and then he takes the Borg implants and he pulls them out of himself, and he uses those and fashions them together to create the Holo Armis. Well, he's not holographic, he's Sim Armis, the fake one.
Yeah, they call him Sim Armis.
So he uses these like Borg implants that he created on this Lieutenant Block guy to create Armis, and we'll talk about the ending of how they dispatch Redjac later, but it was kind of like a weird, like, why is he now taking these Borg implants? Are they real? Are they holographic? I don't know. And now we're making Armis? Why?
Well, so one thing that I think was just a straight up plot hole, unless I missed something on TNG. Why did they have Borg nanoprobes on board the ship that he could use to inject Lieutenant Block with? Because that's where the implants came from. He says a line about like, I stole some nanoprobes from a science lab or something like that. And that's how he was able to, that's where the implants came from. So that was explained. But Voyager having a supply of those, like all the time. They've got 7 on board, and they need to be like seriously investigating the Borg because they're running into them like every 2 weeks. But the Enterprise, I don't know. I was a little surprised that they would just be keeping something that dangerous on the flagship of the Federation. It seemed weird that it was something that he could just like, let me go to storage locker B and get my nanoprobes for the day. Like, what? Why are those there? So I don't know. That was just a little weird to me.
It seems like they wouldn't be the ones that were studying them. Like if you want to study the nanoprobes, then go to a station or something where they have levels of security and clearances and protocols to deal with that stuff. But that's kind of like having something under heavy quarantine on the Enterprise all the time. What would they need that for? It seems kind of weird that they would just, if they had a recent encounter with the Borg and maybe they collected some samples to bring back to a starbase and happen to have them there, then sure, okay. But then it kind of turns into one of those like Justice League cartoons where, they're like, the unveiling of the new technology that can do horrific destruction things will be on TV later tonight at the museum at 7 p.m. and everyone will be there. And the villains are like, yeah.
And you go, like, I wonder if the horrific technology will be involved in this story.
I have no idea. Yeah. So it'd be like at the beginning if they showed us the Borg nanoprobes and they were like, we just got back from whatever star system to pick up some Borg implants to take them back to, starbase, whatever, for research. And whoops, here comes Redjac. He happens to be here too, and find them and use them to infect someone and then turn it into a fake Armis that'll run around and terrorize people.
It's the opposite of what they did on Picard season 1, because in Picard season 1, they set up this whole scenario where they're like, things would be really bad if all the Borg on this ship suddenly rejoined the collective, and then it happens for like 2 seconds and they vent them all into space. And it's like, why were you building this up for 7 episodes if it was going to be over in 2 seconds?
Nothing.
Like, I don't know. It's so, at least they deliver on actually threatening us with those. But
that is true. But at the same time, like, and I don't know if this was true of the show because I haven't watched TNG in a while, but
sure.
It kind of felt to me in this comic that they were a bunch of like pampered space babies. Like, so somebody doesn't show up for their shift. And another thing that Star Trek didn't really answer very well is, are they military or are they pseudo-military or what are they? They have rank, they have orders, but they don't act very military. Okay, whatever. But somebody doesn't show up for their shift at work. Well, if somebody doesn't show up for their shift, you go look for them, you call them, what happened? But they're just like, I don't know what to do. Computer, where are they? Computer doesn't know. Oh no, let's all sit on our chairs and push buttons. And then, like, go look for it. Where are these missing crew members? So then, okay, red alert, a non-physical entity of evil, which that's not very sciencey, but it's evil. Okay, it's pure evil. It's just evil. It's evil energy. Energy from Mega Man 8.
Evil energy.
So Picard goes, hey, a non-physical entity of evil capable of inhabiting life forms and tech is confirmed to be loose on the ship. So the first thing that we need to do is take all the guys that have the phasers and have them round up the guys who don't have the phasers and confine them to their quarters. Again, it can possess people, it can possess tech, and it is going to make everyone scared. So having people with guns escort people without guns is probably not really the best idea. But it doesn't matter because the people that were going to be confined to their quarters got scared and they dodged security anyway. So the security force is like, your own people can evade you. So how are you going to even find these missing crew members that didn't show up for their shift?
There's a season 4 episode of Deep Space Nine where it's the one where Odo is distracted because Kira's started dating Shakar and he doesn't do proper security clearance verification in the turbo lift and somebody tries to kill them. Well, Worf later is like, you're to be commended because your security force is incredibly well trained. Maybe Worf doesn't have much to stack that up against because his is not very well trained at all. They just let everybody go. It is kind of a trope on the original series and TNG that the security guys are kind of there just to get thrown around and killed. And they're not really like super effective. So I don't know. It's one of those things where it was funny in the comic, but I kind of was just like, yeah, that's how they wrote them on The Next Generation. Like they were always like ineffective because we have to show the threat is real. So security can't handle it basically.
And that's really the thing. This comic isn't meant to be serious. It's not meant to be a character study of TNG. It's just really meant to be hey, it's Halloween. Let's have some fun. And if you make it into, too serious, then it's not fun anymore. And I get that. I'm being really hard on this.
Sure.
But like, I really just felt like there was an opportunity that was missed. But like, as we're reading along, there's a part where Block is possessed by Redjac and he has these like long swords that are coming out of his arms. And so he attacks Data and he slashes Data's hand and Data looks at it and goes, minor damage to my synthetic epidermis, but my skeletal muscular system is the better of yours, I see. And then he slaps him like a Luke Cage across the room. And I was like, this is awesome. Why can't the whole story be this tone and we get rid of the space baby thing? Because it was funny, it was dry humor, it was realistic, to some degree with a possessed person attacking a android. But I just thought it was like really cool and it showed character and it was funny and we have that really neat moment. But then later we have Dr. Crusher giving us a psychological breakdown while Counselor Troy is just sitting there. And I'm like, now, wait a minute. Why is Crusher explaining the mental part behind this? Like this should really be where, like where Geordi and Data team up and they're like, this and this. Oh, we could reconfigure this. Well, we're going to do that. Well, how are you guys going to do this? Like they're a team. So that's really how I felt Troy and Crusher should have been, was both of them up there giving the presentation. Crusher talks about the physiological, like the physical effects on the brain and the receptors. And then Troy kind of translates that and talks about their mental states and, things like that. So I was like, on the one hand, you did something that was really smart and cool with Data. Basically these swords aren't going to hurt him. It's no big deal. And it was funny, but then you pivot, and now we've got Dr. Crusher giving us a monologue about all of this stuff. And basically their solution is, well, we can't, use the replicators to use that spray that TOS used to free us from his grip. We can't do that because the whole ship has been hacked. We really have no control of everything. We can't even use the replicators. Hopefully we can use the bathrooms, but we've never seen those on the set. So we don't need to talk about that, and that's fine. But what we can do is use an entertainment device to electrochemically hypnotize an away team and make them think that they are monsters. That must be the solution. What?
Yeah.
What?
So I was really curious if they were trying to reference the game and the device that everybody wore where they were making the discs go into the cones.
Oh yeah.
And that really bad CGI.
Have you played this game?
Like, was that have you played this game? And it's just like, yeah. I was unsure, were they trying to reference that? Like, do they have that tech because of that, where it puts you into this other mind state that's like euphoric? But it's interesting because on TOS, McCoy, what he's injecting people with makes them feel like really good, and they're all just like, so like Chief Kyle at the transporter is like, don't worry guys, I'm getting to it, I'll beam you down. And and Kirk is like, get out of the way, mister. He's just like, we don't have time for your silliness. But yeah, that was sort of their answer, was we'll get everybody like super high and where they're just like really happy, and then they don't care about whatever Redjac's doing. There's a part even where Scotty is like, he's killed an awful lot of people, Captain. And he's just like laughing about it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like They really just don't care. So it seemed to me that like, why, if that was something in a hypo spray, I don't know why Dr. Crusher couldn't mix that up, except I guess Redjac was just preventing them from using those specific chemicals or something. The idea was supposed to be that he had learned from his encounter with the original Enterprise. But I don't know if that totally came across. As far as the physical transformation, okay, so they've done things where they've gone to like underdeveloped planets before, and they have to be in that attire to fit in, so that people don't know that they're not an element of that world. And so it kind of felt like one of those away missions where they're like, well, we need you to get in costume so that you look like you belong on the holodeck with all of the other creepy stuff that Redjac is doing. Except the minute they got there, he was like, hey, I can't read 4 of the monsters that are here. I can't sense any fear from them. Something is wrong. So like
they're covered with blood already.
Really matter? I don't know. It just seemed like it. I do understand, and I know I'm ranting too much about this because, like you said, this is trying to be fun. It's trying to just be a fun, enjoyable journey with the TNG characters where we see like an old TOS enemy. Maybe they connect it to some canon stuff like Armis, and then we're out, right? But it is really hard because TNG is much more grounded than TOS. It's really hard to accept that Dr. Crusher of all people would be like, Deanna, you need to look like a mummy. And Commander Riker, you need to be a werewolf. And Worf, you're the creature from the Black Lagoon, except the Klingon version. And, and I'm just like, why was that? Yeah, I'm with you. Like, that was a really bizarre choice.
Okay, yes.
It's cool visually because it's a comic book.
Right.
But it was really strange.
Well, and like, yeah, the monsters were strange, but at the same time, like, as soon as I saw Aqua Wharf, I was like, now wait a minute, this might be a worthy spin-off series. Like Aqua Wharf and his instead of a trident, it's a trileth because it's a batleth, but it's like a trident, and he's Aqua Wharf, and I'm like, that's kind of cool, actually. I like that. But the rest of them were kind of goofy, and like, at the same time, like, how many holodeck catastrophes do we need to explore in stories, especially again in 2023. The holodeck malfunctioned again. Like, at some point, there's some engineer that should be slapped for not putting a circuit breaker on there that literally all you have to do is remove a panel and go click, and all the electricity is gone to where the thing can't operate anymore. But you know, they make up techno babble stuff about how once the emitters are engaged, you can't just cut the power because it's like drawing the power and you can't interrupt the current. And it's like, okay, but if you know that, and you know that every time there's a lightning storm outside, that the holodeck is going to start spitting out monsters, maybe you should figure out a way. Or how about we just stop using the holodeck? How about we get rid of it? How about we destroy it? Because is it really that helpful? I mean, Counselor Troy isn't even counseling people. So why do we need a counselor? Why do we need a holodeck?
It's true. The holodeck is one of those things where it's obviously, you know, within the confines of the show, it's an excuse for them to shoot on location.
Yeah.
It's an excuse for them to have adventures and do things that they wouldn't normally do on the show and kind of have a little fun.
Right.
Our man Bashir on Deep Space Nine, I think, is one of the best case scenarios where it's like, we're having this little fun little James Bond kind of adventure with Dr. Bashir and Garrick. And like, that was fun. They, of course, had to have really high stakes by having everybody's like transporter patterns uploaded to the holodeck. So they were all going to die if they didn't keep it running or something, you know?
Yeah.
But so that was an instance where it saved them because they were like, well, this has the capacity to hold that much data. But yeah, more often than not, it's a threat to everybody. I mean, the Enterprise D crew have already created a sentient life form without trying to, that was trying to take over the ship and kill people in Moriarty. So at that point, you would think that would be enough where Picard's like, you know, maybe we're not ready for this technology. What makes it worse is that I think it was 3 weeks ago on Strange New Worlds, the new episode was so Starfleet Command is telling Scotty and Pelia, who's the actual chief engineer, because he's like a junior engineer on Pike's Enterprise. They were telling them, like, we want you to try out this new device because missions will eventually be longer than 5 years, and so the crew may get stir crazy, and we need you to test it. So it's the holodeck. They're basically testing the holodeck, right? To see, and their conclusion at the end of the episode is that it's too dangerous, the technology is not ready, and that they need to go through like hundreds of years of more engineering and scientific development to get it to be like a viable thing. So not Kirk's Enterprise, but Pike's Enterprise crew goes, the holodeck is too dangerous. And so in that episode, I was thinking, so if that's supposed to be before the other stuff, then Picard should have pulled the plug instantly when it went wrong and been like, you know what? The technology is a cool idea, but we're just not going to do it now. We're going to find something else. We're going to go visit Risa, you know, do something other than having these simulations that can actually come to life and murder us.
Right. Well, and two, like, at least go, hey, we're going to put this, you know, we're going to do like a beta trial of this holodeck thing because we need to test it out in the field. We need to see how it responds to actual environmental, because you don't know what's out there in the galaxy.
Right.
You go through a nebula and it's wreaking havoc with your systems. And so you go, okay, I need to prevent myself from having this issue. So obviously don't fly into the nebula. But if you have to go in there, find a way to get your technology to work. But not every nebula is necessarily the same. But at the same time, if you find that every time you put your ship into something where there is a big cloud and it always wreaks havoc with your systems, then maybe the problem isn't trying to develop better systems. Maybe the problem is staying out of the clouds, which would be remove the holodeck. Like, let's try some shielding on the holodeck. Let's try a circuit breaker. Let's try this. Oh, it doesn't work. We still had Redjac, who was able to create holograms that we couldn't shut down and take over the ship. Well, might be time to scrap this holodeck idea, guys, because it doesn't seem like it's working. But that's not the issue. The issue for me is it's 2023. Why are we still playing holodeck games like it's 1990?
Yeah. That's a good point. I think I was disappointed with the implementation of the holodeck in general, because I felt like it really confined him to one space
Mhm.
for a lot of the story. And unlike Wolf in the Fold, I don't feel that much threat from the Redjac in this story, because all
Yeah.
he's really done is hold people hostage. Yes, he's frightening them and he's like feeding off of their fear, but he never kills anybody. In fact, I don't think anybody was even injured. And while I would love for all of the Enterprise crew to live, I think that they needed something to kind of up the ante of the intensity in this story, because at a certain point I was like, so all he's doing is he's like hiding people in the holodeck and behind scary simulations, and he's feeding on their fear. He like threatened to take over the ship a couple times, but he didn't really do anything except for keeping them from like using the replicators to make stuff to defeat him. Like on TOS, he starts messing with the life support systems. And so Spock actually has to go in and physically remove circuits that, kind of like you were discussing with the holodeck, so that he can't access from his place in the system life support, because he could kill everybody on the ship. So that's like a genuine threat to everyone. It felt like Picard going, hey, I'm going to blow up the ship because you've made a pseudo Armis, when nobody had even died, and most of the problem was just we need to get our people out, was like kind of an extreme solution. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like
So
it's
so
just
that
he never like raised, he never upped the ante to the level where I was like, oh man, they're in trouble. Like, what's the TNG crew gonna do? You know?
Right. What they're gonna do when I step in the groove. The thing for me, the $1,000,000 question for this particular comic for me is, why does it exist? So if this is supposed to be a, hey, we just wanted to test the waters to see if anybody cares about Star Trek anymore, okay, makes sense. If this was a Holo-Ween special, or like why are we doing this? So this made me think of Archie versus Predator. So in Archie versus Predator, you hear that there's going to be a Predator who is going to be in this Archie comic book. And so my first thought was, oh, it's going to be, like a kid Predator, which it was. And it's going to be like this, where Redjac comes and he scares everybody. And oh no, he's going to take over the ship. But don't worry, everyone's fine. We saw their parachutes. They're all alive. Well, they don't use parachutes in Star Trek, but they use them on Dragon Ball Z when they censor in people surviving, a helicopter crash because it's, the 90s and they have to censor.
Shuttlecraft.
Yeah, Starfleet shuttlecraft. That's it.
Napa blows up a Starfleet shuttlecraft.
But my point is, like, if we did this to be a creepy Halloween episode as a one-off, or not episode, but comic, then why not go the Archie versus Predator route? Why not have Redjac like kill practically the whole crew? Because it doesn't matter. This is just a one-off. We're doing it for fun. It's about Halloween. So why not make it actually scary? A what if, everybody got killed? And I know I'm speculating again, but that's what I like to do. But I think that would have framed it better. Yeah.
I think this clearly, it's a 4-issue miniseries, so it's a self-contained story. I think what you're getting at, and the thought hadn't occurred to me, but I think I agree with you, is that this idea would have been better served by not adhering to setting it within continuity. It would have been better served by going, here's just sort of an alternate universe story that we're telling, and it's a lot of fun, and we get in and we get out, and we see Redjac come back and make it into kind of a slasher movie type thing, whatever. But that could be, a lot of fun. And if we were going into it with that mentality, I think that I would have enjoyed it more. I just think that them giving us so many clues to exactly where it falls in canon, that made me expect it to start to obey the rules of the universe. And so then when they don't do that, or they make weird story decisions, it feels more jarring than if they set it up from the beginning as, we're just doing a crazy thing, it doesn't matter,
Yeah, because then it's like you start to kind of think a little bit more about, the stuff that we've seen since TNG has been on the air. And then so you start to sort of judge it through that lens, because this is a modern story. So it's like, well, what about some modern things like, the whole senior staff has to go off and play monster, right? And in the olden days of TNG, we would see that basically the whole senior staff is off, gallivanting about the galaxy while a skeleton crew is running the ship. And it's like, is this really a good idea? So same thing here. It was worse
on DS9.
Yeah, true. But here,
everyone get on the Defiant.
Here we're risking permanent psychosis of our senior staff. So if these people get captured, they're going to go psycho, and they might even be co-opted by the enemy and taken over. So this is probably a very, very high risk where you would not want to send your senior staff. But then it kind of made me wonder, while they are doing that, who is running the ship? Like Starfleet to Enterprise, we're doing a routine check. This is Ensign Nobody. The senior staff had transformed themselves into monsters to combat a threat. So I'm the only one on the bridge. But they didn't even tell Starfleet, because it wasn't until issue 3 when Crusher finally sends out a signal after the monstrous away team is chased by crew with pitchforks. And she's like, oh, by the way, Starfleet, I just want to let you know that, there's some monsters and Redjacs on the ship, and we got to watch out. And it's like that was issue 3 we did that?
Yeah.
There's just
it seemed like maybe they should have
contacted
contacted them earlier. Or even given a warning to like stay away from the ship or something, because we've got this entity here. We haven't figured out how to contain it. You need to give us a wide berth, anything like that. What was I going to say?
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. I'm looking at your stuff. I see you answered a question that I had, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. So, you mentioned, this was way earlier, but you talked about like sort of Aqua Wharf and how cool that was. So first of all, like he looked really cool, and I liked that he came up with this is a creature of myth from Klingon lore. Mm-hmm. I really wish that with Deanna being a Betazoid, that they would have found some sort of thing that we don't recognize that was from Betazed. And not that it wasn't all kind of just like these are Earth things that we already know. Because I don't know, like it seemed a little cheesy with us having like, okay, so Picard is Dr. Jekyll. He doesn't transform into Mr. Hyde because they couldn't do that. Although they did enhance their strength by using like force fields or some sort of weird technological workaround.
Something. Yeah, they just briefly mentioned that.
I forget what that was, but it was a justification for them to be stronger than they should be. But I thought that was really cool. Like, yes, let's see monsters from other planets and what they have in their mythology. And I felt like that was kind of a dropped ball with Deanna to just make her like a mummy.
That would have been interesting, and like to see more of the monsters. Like maybe everybody sees their monster from their own mythology, and so we see Worf out in the hallway, and he's like, "Oh, it's a Doc Targ or something. It's like a Targ, but it's like a Hell Targ, or something." And
Feklar.
It's Feklar. And then Troy's like, oh no, that's not Feklar. That's, the Betazoid mind player or something. But I think because we had Redjac here, Redjac specifically was from Earth. So maybe they had to do, Earth monsters because Redjac would have seen them coming a mile away if they weren't Earth monsters. Of course, he saw them coming a mile away anyway. But
I guess the idea is that he's pulling from what he actually knows from human history, maybe.
Something like that. But then he scans the Enterprise computer, and that's why he's like, oh, you guys are probably afraid of this Armus guy. Well, let me, bring him into the fold because that'll be more fun than a wolf, kind of thing. So if he was looking at the computer pulling new stuff, why wouldn't he? Maybe that's the question, is why wouldn't he pull monsters from the civilizations that the Enterprise crew comes from? Because really you're just scaring the humans. Worf's like, I don't know what a mummy is.
Right.
I don't know what Frankenstein is. Why am I scared? Who's Freddy Krueger?
Right.
What's this weird droopy white mask that looks like it was, melting or something? Why is that scary? I don't know. Feklar, he's scary, but this Earth stuff, like, because he doesn't even comment at the end when they're doing Holo-Ween, and he's like, this isn't scary at all. On Klingon, rituals are much more scary.
Yeah,
So,
like we would have to serve the heart of our enemies to our lover, or something.
yeah.
It's always, they're always serving hearts on
So
Kronos, but
so Redjac should make every monster, or he should make a couple monsters that look like Alexander, and Alexander's a little kid, and
yeah,
he's like, dead, dead, and Worf's like, oh
they
my
could have
gosh,
done,
no, please, not that, anything but
yeah.
that.
Anything but spending time with my son.
No, that's much scarier than Frankenstein and Jekyll and Hyde and Aqua Wharf.
I mean, they could have gone so dark with it, and I'm really fascinated that they didn't,
Yeah,
especially because the very setup in TOS of this character is he is essentially a non-corporeal serial killer. And so that right away sets a certain tone and expectation for the story. So when I looked this up online and I was like, oh, I don't know if there's like a Star Trek villains trade or something that fits in with our Year of the Villain review thing, but this looks like it's bringing back a classic villain to kind of menace the crew, and let's see what that looks like. And I thought Redjac would be a really fascinating one, but really, I mean, honestly, after watching the TOS episode, this feels like a really like milquetoast version of him that's not that scary or threatening. So
yeah.
I don't know.
That's kind of disappointing.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was like basically getting into the ending. So they basically used this communications device to eject Redjac's energy patterns from the ship.
Right.
And they said,
they have to eject him from Block's body first, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because isn't he physically inhabiting his body? Yeah.
Yeah. So they have to eject his energy from the ship, or from his body and the ship, and they kind of just broadcast it into space and go, well, he's someone else's problem now, which is a very Star Trek thing to do of, hey, we just spent this whole episode battling with this thing, and now we've got rid of it. Hey, time for a party. But, obviously that means that he's probably still out there. He could get into another ship's communication. Like, that's how he got on board. So, they were making a long distance call to receive information about Holo-Ween, and Redjac was like, I'll take that one. So what if they basically delivered him like an email virus to some unsuspecting alien civilization? They'd probably see that as an act of war. And then Data downloads the Holo-Ween lore and then accidentally reopens the channel Redjac was writing. Then can't Redjac just come back? Because he already proved he can backtrack, so he'll probably do it again. So is this the end, or maybe it isn't? That's the real scary story of Star Trek Holo-Ween, is will Redjac come back maybe? Who knows? It's a time loop too. I don't know.
Well, it's funny because what they did in TOS is they actually used the transporter to disperse the molecules of the cloud that he's composed of across a whole bunch of light years. And so Spock was like, yeah, he could conceivably reconstitute, and he's still conscious, like we didn't kill him, but the molecules of him are all so disparate and far apart that it'll take him a really long time to coalesce again. So it does make sense that the Enterprise encountered him where they did, because Argelis 2 is the planet from Wolf in the Fold. Data made some mention of dispersing his energy, but it felt like what they did in TOS was a lot more efficient with actually, let's use the transporter and beam him into space. But so also, I mean, spoilers if you haven't seen an episode from 1968, but Hengist, the investigator, his body is occupied by the entity, because they find a way to force him out of the ship where he's trying to kill everyone back into Hengist. Well, Hengist is actually dead, so he's in a corpse. He's animating a corpse and coming after the crew. And so what they can do is they can beam that corpse into space and split it up into a whole bunch of pieces without having to kill anybody. And because he's already dead. So that was kind of like the solution in the episode, was like, well, that's what we'll do. So yeah, I don't know. I guess what they would have to do on TNG is find somebody that he had already killed, but he didn't kill anybody. So there was no...
Well, but that's the thing. He took over
opportunity
Block
for them to do that. Yeah.
So, because I saw Block and I kind of wondered. I was like, oh, and then at the end they go, oh, he's fine, or he'll be okay or something. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I thought that it would be more fatal for him to, I assumed that Redjac had killed him in the beginning and then took him over, like killed him for
Yeah.
fun and then possessed him. But, you know,
Yeah.
I guess the possession process should have killed him or something, but it didn't. And so, yeah, it was kind of weird at the end to where, like you said, there were no stakes because not even the
Right.
person who probably should have been killed by the whole thing that happened wasn't. So then, you know, because we have a new character like this block guy we've never heard of before. So he's the
Right.
red shirt, right? He's there to be possessed by the
Right.
the evil character, and he's, you know, essentially a throwaway character. But no, we give
Right.
him a title of security medical specialist, and oh, he's fine. So we'll have more adventures with him in the future. Like, okay, well, that was a fun little Halloween we had there. Hey. I don't know.
It just, yeah, it felt really low stakes.
Yeah.
I did look up a little bit of information about this because I had some questions, especially because I read Lieutenant Block and I was like, that sounds familiar. So Robert Block is the writer of the screenplay for Wolf in the Fold, which was the TOS episode. So yeah, that was a direct sort of like, let's pay homage to the writer of that episode kind of thing.
Yeah, he kind of felt to me like a Lower Decks character. Like he says at one point, this is starting to smell like something we don't like. And then he says, payback for that replicator gig I rigged last week. So it kind of made me think of like Boimler, who's like, oh, why are the lights? Something bad is happening. And then he's like, he turns his back to the monster and uses his comm badge. Oh, it's not working. What's going on? No big deal. And then Redjac, you know, takes him over. It felt really like Lower Decks to me.
Well, you know what made me think of Lower Decks was something you said where you were like, they're gonna just put it back out into space and now it's somebody else's problem. The Cerritos would be the crew that would be the next one to encounter that problem. They'd be like, what the heck?
We're receiving a signal from the Enterprise. Oh, the Enterprise? We love those guys. Turn up the volume. What do they have to say? Here comes Redjac.
Yeah, it would always be because there were several episodes where they were like doing second contact. So they were like following up on something that the Enterprise or some other ship had done. And they find out like, oh, wow, they solved their immediate problem and left. And that actually created a huge problem for this planet. Like it kind of felt like that. We're like, did they really just unleash him back on the universe? I don't know. So yeah, it was funny. I also noticed this popped out to me because Daniel has had me go through, and I've watched all of the like black and white Universal horror movies from, you know, like the 30s, 40s, 50s.
Oh, wow.
So like The Mummy, Frankenstein, Dracula, like the original, for all of those. And there is a 1943 film, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. So there's a moment where Riker as the Wolfman and Data as Frankenstein are saying like, this is a battle as old as time itself. And that was obviously them going like, hey, we know this movie existed back in the 40s kind of thing. So
kind of doing their own little homage. See, and that's the thing is like they have these neat little moments that were kind of like there's light here. There's some, you know, we're trying to do something a little bit different. We're trying to tell something new. And it was kind of cool to see those little bits, but it seemed like they were just little parts here and there. And that made me think too of like, you know, we're transforming the whole senior staff into monsters. Aren't we scared that the monsters are going to attack the crew who are not monsters? Like they meet a bunch of people in the hallway and it's like, hey guys, whoops. You know, like, do we just kill our own crew? Well, nobody gets killed, but
well, it was incredibly risky too, right? Because the whole time you're seeing a T-minus 27 minutes or T-minus 10 minutes, and that was until they completely lose their personalities and they're submerged by the monster personality that had been implanted by Dr. Crusher. So this is a horrendously dangerous procedure that they underwent, like not just to the rest of the crew, but like to the actual people doing it. I kind of felt like Picard should have been like, no, we'll find another option. You know, like that's
or
let's
not go
think about
himself.
this
Like
more.
this was not the time to be involved with the away team. Like this was one to
Yeah.
sit back and either let the red shirts handle it or, let the trusted members of your staff handle it, but maybe like one or two, not,
Right.
all 4 or 5 of
Not
your.
everybody that was left.
Yeah.
The other reference, I was trying to figure out where they were taking Worf's thing from, but Creature from the Black Lagoon from 1954, some of his outfit is kind of similar to that. I think that thing also has some kind of a trident, which is really just associated with nautical stuff in general.
Yeah.
So they were kind of going for, we're trying to do classic Universal movie monsters. So like, again, that was fun. Wanted more alien versions.
And more Aqua Wharf. My man.
Yeah, and more Aqua Wharf. My man. Yeah.
Look out, Momoa. Here comes Aqua Wharf.
Yeah, that would have been, I don't know, would have been cool.
Yeah.
So the only other thing that we haven't really talked about, I guess, is the art. And did you have any thoughts before I do my breakdown of it?
Sure. So, well, it's kind of weird for me to go first. Hopefully I'm right. Because usually I take what you say and I kind of just echo that and I go, see, I know what I'm talking about. But to me, it was interesting. Like I was looking at the artwork and at first I was like, it sort of looks like sketched animation. Like it almost looks like an animated show, not a cartoon, but an animated show, or kind of like the style of how they draw Silk or Spider-Gwen comics, but like more realistic instead of with watercolors and stylistic and all of that stuff. But there were a lot of inconsistencies. Like sometimes their faces would look wonky, or like Counselor Troy like looks so different when she's turning her head this way versus when she's looking one way or the other. But then they took the time to draw this crazy detail in this LCARS display, this computer display on the back of the conference room wall.
Yeah.
Like this is really small. And so I took a screenshot and I actually blew it up because I was
oh my gosh, you're not
there's
kidding.
a lot of detail in that panel. Why? But then I was looking at how blurry that panel looked, and I was looking at how Picard's mouth kind of like has a little blur on it. And I was looking at Counselor Troy's hands, and I was like,
sure,
that almost looks like early AI to me. Those are some of the like telltale signs. I don't, it probably isn't, but it was still kind of weird. Like, why is this so detailed and why is it kind of blurry? And, but with the inconsistencies in their faces, I did think that when Barclay shows up, he actually like his body language, I thought represented the character, the actor perfectly. He's got like his head in his hands and he's slumped forward. He's like pulling on his face like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. Oh my goodness. And then he's like, got the thing, and he's like holding his head, not like a face palm, but his like hand on his head. And he's just like, looking down. And I thought they got his mannerisms right, but his face looked wrong. And so I was kind of like, is this good? Is this bad? I don't know.
There was a panel where I noticed him he had his fingers on his neck, doing that thing that Counselor Troy taught him from that episode where he's like, oh yes, I feel better. Wait, she had some quick comment about like, well, I've shown you a method to deal with your anxiety. And I was like, is he going to do the stupid? And he was like, he had his fingers up there. Like, I've tried that in real life and I'm like, I don't think this is doing anything. I don't know. Like, what is that?
That's probably something they made up for the show to see how many fans would do it and be like, I remember this. And they're like, haha, I made that up. It's not real. Grab Thor's hammer.
But yeah, the art for me was sort of a step between our very first Star Trek review in season 1, where I thought ships look great, everybody else looks terrible, unless they're clearly just scanning a pose directly from a still or animation or something. This was not terrible, but coming off the heels of Star Wars last episode, that definitely had more detail in the outfits, in the faces, in all of those things. And even though I had some confusion as to who was who, with this, I did not have that confusion. One, because the uniforms are different, but two, because the faces were close enough and the hairstyles were close enough that I could go, okay, I know that's Dr. Crusher. I know that's Lieutenant Commander Barclay, things like that. So it's it's kind of in this weird space of, I think that Eisma could have gone with more detail and it would have been beneficial, but what's there was sufficient to tell the story they were telling too.
Yeah.
So I don't
It's like
know.
there was no confusion. You didn't feel like you weren't
Yeah.
on the Enterprise D. You didn't feel like they weren't who they were. It's just like we see Troy like looking sideways and she looks kind of feminine, and then we have her looking to the left and she looks a little masculine, and then we have her looking straight on and suddenly her hair is undone and it's kind of curly and she looks a little like more youthful and less serious. And then we have Dr. Crusher, who her hair looks thicker, and it's like the core of who they were was there, who you could tell they were, but shot to shot, panel to panel, it was different enough that it was like almost like a different artist was doing different panels.
It didn't have a lot of consistency. I guess my biggest observation, because I pretty much agree with everything you've said about the art. My biggest observation about it is that it just kind of looks rushed to me. It looks like they could have maybe spent more time. The backgrounds, generally speaking, look great for the whole series. I mean, they line up really well with TNG and all of that. You've actually got Nurse Ogawa in this panel as well, and I don't particularly think that looks like Patty Yasatake either. So it's, you know, this is one of those franchises where you've got really recognizable people, and if you're not nailing it right away, I mean, people are going to know. The covers were done by a different artist that I think did a really good job of kind of capturing the sort of horror style, but also getting good portraits of the people. The monsters you can see on the back here, they almost fit within this artist's style better than drawing the TNG characters as is. So we're not doing a profile on them this time, but I think it would be interesting to look up, what is Joe Eisma's background in art? Has he done a lot of monster comics or something? You know, maybe that's why he got hired. So,
well, we could always do that as like a mini or something.
Yeah. I don't think the art was like a plus or a minus for me. It just kind of was there and it told the story, but it really didn't stand out to me this time. So.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. Like, I don't have any points that I would say it brought the comic down. You know, we nitpick some things, but overall it served the story and didn't cause any confusion as to who was who and what was what. And so, yeah. All right. Well, anything else before we move into final thoughts?
I believe I am ready to move into final thoughts.
Well, let's set it to warp speed and engage.
So, I mean, we've talked through a lot of this. I think that when we do Star Trek, it's kind of hard for us to find disparate opinions, really, because we've seen a lot of the same stuff. We both grew up watching it at the same time, often together. So, you know, we tend to be on the same page with a lot of Star Trek things. I think what I want to do is give this story a 3 because it was decently fun, but I did have a lot of problems with the nuts and bolts of it, how they implemented things, and thought that it could have been done better. What really drags it down, I think another 0.5 for me, to a 2.5, is that after our discussion, it really kind of highlighted that they didn't pick a lane for what they wanted this story to be. If you want it to be a fun horror story with the Star Trek TNG characters, then do that and commit to it. If you want it to be something that is grounded and fits within the show's canon, then do that and commit to that. But it feels like we were in this weird in-between space where the writer was kind of trying to make everyone happy and didn't know what they wanted it to be. It's Mr. Tricorder. And didn't know what they wanted it to be or what their audience was. And I think it really would have benefited the story to just pick a lane. So I think I'm going to have to give it a 2.5. So that's straight down the middle. That's half the points. I did enjoy aspects of it. I do think that it was fun to see the TNG crew change into monsters. Like we said, the art really wasn't too bad. It did a fine job of telling the story. And I really like the concept of Redjac coming back and menacing the crew. It's just there were so many ways that they could have made the story better in one lane or the other. And since they didn't pick one, you end up with something that's just very middle of the road and it kind of doesn't really go anywhere. So yeah, I think it's going to be 2.5 bananas. They're burned bananas. They're burned. 2.5 bananas for me.
So if this story had been written around, say, 2000, I probably would have rated it a little higher. But I've brought this up several times that this is 2023. We're telling, we're basically fitting in a pocket episode that didn't exist into a show, conceivably somewhere where it could have existed in continuity. Okay, great. You're going to take certain liberties when you do that. You're going to make certain continuity errors when you make that. It's just, something that's really hard to do. Okay. So I can forgive that. I can not be so critical that I'm like, well, technically Troy got her pips on this star date and this happened on this star date. So it could have never happened. Like, we'll bring that up and talk about it, but that's not going to make me say this comic sucked and the writer should have known better. But the thing that I was really looking for out of this was, like I said, with Star Trek Year 5, where we really brought new life to the original series. And that was something that I really appreciated, because I thought this is the way for modern readers to get into the original series, is by having a original series that's told in a modern way, but they still have the old tech. They still have the limitations that they did, but it all makes sense within universe. Whereas I feel like this one really wasn't trying to make sense within universe. They were more just kind of like playing on the IP. Hey, I get to be in the Star Trek The Next Generation world. Here's kind of what I remember from the shows. Here's kind of like, it was kind of like more a fanfic, where this is a fun story where some Holo-Ween characters escape out of the holodeck and we have a nice little tight-knit adventure, and then we wrap things up in a pretty bow and we move on, which again, that was a lot of The Next Generation. That was a lot of Voyager even. So that makes sense. But again, why are we doing this comic? Are we doing this because we want to enjoy the nostalgia from the old days and act like this is a TV show that came out, late 80s, early 90s? Or are we doing this because we want to tell a really cool TNG story? And so for me, the why of why we're doing this is what makes it hard for me to rate this, because if this was meant to be a children's story to get them into Star Trek, by making it cool about Holo-Ween, okay, I could see us not wanting to kill anybody, because that would make sense. But from what I was expecting either something like Star Trek Year 5, where it's more realistic Star Trek, or something like Archie versus Predator, where it's just slapstick, we're doing this because it's fun. And I wish that, kind of like you said, pick a lane. I feel like they didn't necessarily have to do it better one way or the other. They just had to decide, is it going to be goofy or is it going to be serious? And I never really understood if it was meant to be one or the other. So it was too serious to be goofy, but too goofy to be serious at the same time. So and so it just left me with like, what were we trying to do here? So I'm going to say I really wouldn't want to read another one of these if there was a part 2, anything like that. This is not something I'm interested in. So I'm going to rate this more of like, maybe I'll just give it a 2. That way it's on the low side, but it's not, because it's not terrible. You don't read it and go, some person who doesn't know what they're doing wrote this. It's not like that. It's just my enjoyment of this was at a level of which a banana is not very fresh and it's kind of mushy and not really pleasant. That was my experience with it. That doesn't mean that it's not very good or that it doesn't carry nutrition value. I just don't like the taste. And that is how I'm going to wrap up my review of this comic by giving it a score of 2 out of 5 bananas. Rather get your potassium from a riper source. Yeah. I think that's perfectly fair. So we're going to be at like a 2.25 or something for this one. That's probably going to be the low point for this year. But just sort of to wrap up, I feel like with Star Trek, we either love what they're doing
or give it a really low score. There's not been a lot of middle ground with it. And I think that comes with the territory of us just knowing the franchise as well as we do. So.
Yeah, could be. All right. Well, that is going to wrap up this episode of We Like Comics because they have no bones. Make sure you head on over to our YouTube channel at Boneless Comics Podcast, where you can watch the video version of this episode and check our after shows where we discuss the creators from our reviews, and we also dive even deeper into comic book history. So check those out.
Yes, and be sure to share your thoughts on social media at Boneless Comics Podcast or on Blue Sky Social or X at Boneless Comics 1. Use the hashtag Boneless Comics Podcast to let us know what you think of Star Trek Holo-Ween.
That's right. Make sure you also visit our website at bonelesscomicspodcast.com, where you can get additional information about us, your hosts, and a link to our new Printify shop where you can order Mike's banana designs on t-shirts, mugs, and more.
That's right. And for the next episode, we're going to be taking a look at selections from DC Meets Looney Tunes, featuring your two favorite Martians, a detective and a hunter with a speech impediment, a contract killer and an invincible roadrunner, and every cat and canary in the universe.
Yikes.
This is another anthology series written and penciled by various creators and published in 2017 by DC Comics, so don't miss it.
All right. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you later.
We like
Comics.
because they have no bones.
Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. That's all, folks.